more or less have
So it's going already.
Okay.
At the end,
influence
If it doesn't die first.
organizations.
it won't. I've just changed the batteries and I got the juice and
also
should last.
How much did you pay for the battery?
£9
In total?
I got rid of the tea.
Yeah, we'll write that down.
Ground up model. So rather than like each model, top down and out. Kind of model creates agents. Manipulate and change and make decisions. And looking at the interaction of those agents. In the abstract. In the abstract. But then mostly applied to, or I'll probably apply to like Scottish Chinese model. Yeah. Should be, hopefully.
How was that? Was that theoretically?
No, it was very interesting.
Heavy.
Yeah. Well, no, I mean it was appropriately theoretically.
I was trying to look
heavy,
at
yeah. It was very interesting. Taking on.
One, I'm gonna have to leave. I don't know how long it's gonna take to get to the airport.
Probably flying back.
Also,
What is your flight?
It's
well, let me copy
to
the
be there
presentation onto the desktop.
around
It says
You to be there on time.
Yeah.
Well, the Airlink bus, I guess, probably 45 minutes at the tops.
So I've tried putting, that's
I'd say, yeah, from Waverley.
whether I can use my own
Yeah,
laptop.
so it's about 45 minutes tops.
Okay, so it's about 20 minutes to get to Waverley and then
From here, where are we? 13. Yeah,
15
20
minutes.
minutes. Yeah.
Okay,
So you,
good to meet you all.
yeah, very nice to meet you. Thanks for presenting.
Good luck with the
Yeah,
new wave of cooperatives coming out of this part of the world.
And that's what we hope. Yeah.
Get back to me with your.
Yeah.
We'll try
Okay. Okay, good. I'm not going yet. But
Okay.
let's move to this one. Disruption when I said
Right, cool. Thanks, man.
sorry. Well, yeah, my laptop's not showing my screen.
Holiday. In the true sense of the word.
Yeah, the website.
It won't connect.
People to view.
I did interview. I went on Sunday night, so I did come across the weekend. Do my BBC and then what was it? So easy to get to from Glasgow. Stayed in the hospital when I was 9:30. It was so great. I didn't set my alarm, and I just relied on Dawn to wake me up.
Oh, wonderful. Yeah, of course, sorry.
I was so excited about it.
Try again.
Oh no, something about the film. They're having a series of
Sounds like you might be.
Oh, you'll know Joe. Joe Boyle.
Who else?
Josie. And then my she and I we go to secondary school downstairs.
So if you
This is not doing it wrong. Keep it similar, but not related to.
No, so
Conceivably explain.
Yeah, so didn't have to do that yesterday.
I don't know, it was not done that.
Yeah. No, it's fine. But it was last one.
But more time for
We built it.
research.
We went with the keyboards were in
Well, it's, I mean, it's like what I do with my time. I'm devoting most of research more time. Which I find great fun. These are the great problems that I have when I was doing my MBA. I was supposed to be working in neuroscience, and I was this great opportunity. I was in a lab from day one. I was working with mice. Some kind of Huntington's model of Huntington's disease. Information exchange.
Oh yeah,
Yeah, there's a model of Huntington's.
Were they given it?
Yeah,
Within your own folder, you have lots of storage, and then things like the desktop can come under that.
It was genetic manipulation. So, yeah, so there's a particular gene in humans that has this repeat of and the number of times do you know what I'm talking about? So your DNA is composed of four letters, right? And so this is in your DNA, this is part of your DNA. And the number of repeats signifies whether or not you have this disease. So if you have like 100 repeats, you will have some repeats. You might have like late onset symptoms. It doesn't come natural in mice.
It's got sound to it.
You can create, or you can do this thing and then see what the expression is. So it's a model. You study this device and understand how it works.
That's cool.
Maybe
Maybe
sorted.
sorted. Maybe sorted.
Not the two of us, that's probably studying with that thing. So, you can follow that. Done a PhD. Something like that.
Right, I'd like to introduce the fourth and final academic speaker of the day. We have Julie Thorpe here from Manchester Cooperative College. She joined the Co-op College in 2007 and now heads the Youth and School Programmes team, which is now working towards mainstreaming of cooperative values and in the education system across the UK. And today she will be talking to us about those very values and principles.
Well, good afternoon. Thanks ever so much for being here. I'm going to try not to talk too much because I think some of you who've been here for a long time today are probably ready to do some talking instead of too much more listening. And I'm definitely going to make up for any overdose of theory in the last session with a serious lack of any theory in this session. So I apologise in advance for that. I work at the Cooperative College, which is based in Manchester, and it's been mentioned already a couple of times today, but I thought I really ought to start by introducing it because most of you have probably never come across the college and think, oh, that's strange, I didn't know there was a Cooperative College. It started in 1919 and it was set up by the UK cooperative movement, by the Cooperative Union as it was then, what's net today Co-ops UK, an umbrella for all the cooperatives in the UK. Straight after the First World War, and really with the aim of providing a lasting memorial and a tribute to forthcoming peace, a centre for the study of cooperation. And so that was very much the background to it. And the college brought together lots of learning programmes that have been going on all over the country, run by the Cooperative Union, run by individual cooperative societies, and lots of different bits of research and other educational opportunities that there were across the And in its early days, it used to run year and 2 year long programmes for cooperative managers. Starting off in Manchester, it then ended up having a lovely residential stately home in Leicestershire, which about 12 years ago now was sold on, and we moved back to Manchester. The days of those sorts of residential centres really have gone. It was cost a lot to run as a conference centre, and we no longer had people coming on year-long programmes. We were struggling to get people to come for a weekend there. Because the nature of the way that people in the cooperative movement wanted to receive training had changed. And so today, the training programmes that we offer in the UK, which are mainly for cooperative members who are engaged in the democratic structures of cooperatives. So you might be on a board of your consumer or worker co-op society, or you might be somebody who's considering getting involved and you want to know more about it. So the programmes we offer are mainly focused on cooperative identity. What are cooperatives all about? What makes them tick? What's it important for people to understand about them? Rather than being a business school. We're not a business school. But alongside that, lots of other things have developed. We have a research team, which includes a number of joint doctoral students. We work in partnership with a number of universities, including the Open University, Manchester Met. Tony Webster, who, if you were here this morning, spoke, is on our trustee board. And we've got research projects going on cooperatives in international development, on cooperative schools, on various aspects of the history of the cooperative movement. So lots of diverse things happening there. We're really lucky, and particularly the researchers are really lucky, that we also host the National Cooperative Archives, and we run the Rochdale Pioneers Museum in Rochdale, not surprisingly. But the archive has been pulled together on a national basis over the last 10 or 15 years. It sits in the basement of our building, and we have a couple of very dedicated archivists who are looking after it. We've had various projects to catalogue some of the important collections. And I'm not a historian, but I get excited when they come running in saying, look what we've found now, and it'll be something that nobody knew about at all. We've got a collection, for example, of 3,500 of Robert Owen's writings, correspondence, and so on. So it's designated as a nationally significant archive. We have an international team who work mainly. Our main focus is on cooperative development in East and Southern Africa, supporting cooperative development in those countries, usually by supporting education. The development of education that the cooperatives are based on. And my particular area of work is with cooperative schools. And actually we now have over 800 schools. The figures, I have to keep changing my PowerPoint presentations every week, so it's perfectly reasonable to be out of date on that one. A phenomenon that's absolutely mushroomed since the first cooperative school started in 2008. They're state schools, ordinary primary and secondary schools that have taken advantage of an opportunity in the 2006 education legislation, which allowed schools to move from local authority control into charitable trusts. So we set up a model which involved a multi-stakeholder cooperative underpinning that trust. Parents, staff, the local community and the students of the schools can all be members of the trust, and they can have a voice through a members' forum and appoint some of the trustees. the schools also commit themselves to operating in accordance with the globally agreed values and principles of cooperatives. So almost overnight, it feels like overnight, we've gone from this being something that seemed like a really good idea to it having 800 schools that have gone through a legal conversion process. They're all over the country. There do tend to be clusters in different, oh, I say all over the country, I've forgotten I'm in Scotland. I apologise there. They're all over England because the Scottish education system is very different and schools here are still very much run from the local authority base. In England, it's been very much a response to the neoliberal academies agenda, although there is also a cooperative model for academies that again puts stakeholders at the heart of running the schools. That's not what I'm here to talk about, so if you want to know any more about any of those things, grab me afterwards. But what I am supposed to be here to talk about is, interest, cooperative values and principles. And I thought, first of all, it would be quite interesting to find out a bit about you. Who's actually a member of a co-op here? Most people-ish. How long have you been? Have you been a member of a co-op for longer than a year? Anybody for longer than a year? Anybody for more than 2 years? Anybody for more than 5 years? Okay, so most of you are relatively new co-op members, by my standards of being very old. And does anybody feel like saying why they got involved in the co-op that they're involved with? What was it that attracted you to it? What made you think, oh yes, that sounds like a good idea?
To get away from the inequality of decision making in a hierarchical model.
Right. Okay. Anyone else?
It feels a lot more, well, for the model that Gavin and I are involved in, feels a lot more resilient. To have a lot of people involved equally, and it means that we can have a lot more people coming through for what we want to do anyway.
I got involved through cooperative because I believe that it should be a right to be able to distribute really good quality food without getting profit involved in the matter.
Okay, great. So there's a number of different reasons there, but mainly they're about actually having control over your life in different ways, I think, aren't they? Sort of like having more of a say and having more control over your food or your housing or whatever it is more directly. Cool. I know some people have been here all day and other people have just come along for the last couple of sessions. I thought it would be interesting to, and some people have been involved in co-ops longer than others. I thought it would be interesting to just sort of have a quick quiz and see what people know already about co-ops. This relies on at least some people having smartphones. Was that a reasonable assumption to make? Or is there a serious sort of anti-phone culture up here? No? Has anybody not got a smartphone? Would you be happy to work with, would you be happy to let him share with you?
Does that work as well?
Yeah, tablet, yeah. Did you not have, sorry.
Alex?
Yeah, I've got one.
You've got one, cool, okay. Right, so you need to just browse to Kahoot. I don't think you need any W's in front of it. I'll give you a pen in a second. Okay. put the pin in, it asks you to put a nickname up, and when you put your nickname in, we should see you appearing up there. Okay, anyone else still trying to get in?
I'm trying to get in. Just my internet's a bit slow, sorry.
That's all right. Cool, is that everyone? Mm-hmm. Yeah, okay. So, these questions roughly, generally about cooperative values and principles and cooperative movement. It's a simple one. Choose your answer and then press the right colour on your phone. You've got 5 seconds left. Okay, well done, well done. So, some good deduction there, I think, in most people's part. Oh, we do get scores as well, so this gets a bit competitive. Yeah. Whoa, somebody's got, and it depends on how quickly you answer too, so there's somebody with very fast fingers there. So, the next question, why are cooperatives different to other businesses? Five seconds to go. Guess now. Ooh. Okay. I reckon actually this is a question, some of those answers we could probably have an argument about, but the one that's set as correct is that members own their own co-op and are not remote from the business. So, question 3, who is cooperative membership open to? Yeah, if you're a member of a cooperative, you do actually have to say that you're prepared to accept the responsibilities that go along with being a member. So there's a little bit more to it than just anybody can join. You may know this one from this morning. Members of the modern co-op, the founders of the modern cooperative.
Can you undo?
That's so unfair.
Oh, but it makes us. I just
Yay! Fantastic.
Oh! They didn't listen.
I thought they did. We went back and we redid it.
Yeah.
I think it takes your first answer, I'm afraid.
Sorry.
Okay. Only 3 of you have got that one. In what year was there, this is the Rochdale Pioneers Cooperative Society formed?
Don't you dare!
Just pick one.
I already picked one.
Very good, very good. 25% chance.
Oh, we're still there.
Question 6. What does ICA stand for? stands for all of those things, so any of the answers would have been right, but you all managed to get the one that I was thinking of, which was the International Cooperative Alliance. When did the International Cooperative Alliance adopt the current Statement on Cooperative Identity? Again, you know, you've got 4 choices really. One of them's right.
This is a reaffirmation of Russia.
Good. Question 8. Which of the following is one of the co-op ethical values?
That's one of the principles.
That's one.
Well, that's one of the principles. Equality is different from equity. One of the values is equity.
Question 9. Which of these statements best describes the value of equality? Question 10. Which of the following is one of the cooperative principles? Very good. Social responsibility is one of the ethical values. They're very tricky, these. I happen to know them off by heart. Question 11. When was the first time a formal definition for cooperative was agreed? Universally.
Universally?
Well, globally. So the global definition, which is part of the Statement of Cooperative Identity, which earlier on we identified was developed in 1995 by the ICA. And your last chance now to get your own back, get your score up. How many times have values and principles been revised since they were first defined? You've got to be guessing this one.
Okay.
Seriously. Yes! And so to the final scores. Well, out in who's Robespierre?
You.
It had to be, didn't it? Mickey and Finn's in the front row, I presume. Well, you did really, really well. There's lots of very high scores there. I'm sure everybody must have got some of them right to manage to get up there. So hope you enjoyed that. It wasn't meant to be too serious. But some of the questions that you might not have known the answers to, you possibly will do by the end of the session. The next thing I've got is a short animated film which just tells or retells a little bit about the story of the Rochdale Pioneers. And I apologise to those of you who may have been here, may have got a longer version of this story from Tony, but I thought it would be useful for everybody to just get a little bit of background about where the current cooperative movement has its origins. the first real successful cooperative. We have to be really careful because if you go around saying the Rochdale Pioneers set up the first cooperative, there's people on you on Twitter instantly. No, it wasn't. It was the Fenwick Weavers, or it was the Huddersfield whatever society, because there were other cooperatives before the Rochdale Pioneers Society. But none of them are still going today. And the... Well, that's what I said, you see. You start having an argument. I'll put you in touch with my historical advisors on that one. I don't think it's worth arguing about. The Rochdale Pioneers were seriously successful. So looking at where they came from and you know what they were trying to achieve and what their successes were, I think is very worthwhile. So without further ado, I'll hand you over to the back to the video.
Cooperation is as old as humanity, and records exist for people working cooperatively right back to the 1760s. But the cooperative movement as we know it today began right here on Todd Lane in Rochdale. Life was hard in the 1840s. There were few jobs for the weavers, people were hungry, and life expectancy was very low. People were often in debt to shopkeepers, who sold poor quality food. This cooperatively owned shop was set up by 28 working people in 1844 who wanted to be able to buy honest food at honest prices. They saved up until they could afford to open a shop and transported their first goods by wheelbarrow all the way from Manchester. This group became known as the Rochdale Pioneers. They had butter, flour, oatmeal, sugar and candles. The gas company thought the co-op shop would not be able to pay their bills and so wouldn't supply them with gas. So the pioneers had to use the candles to light the shop the very first opening night at 8 p.m. on the 21st of December 1844. The Rochdale Pioneers were inspired by Robert Owen and used his ideas to create the cooperative values. Anyone could join the cooperative by paying £1, regardless of their religion, politics or job, and each person had one vote. They sold pure goods, and the shop profits were shared with the members as dividends. After 1 year, they had 74 members, and by 1860 this had grown to 3,450 members and 6 new stores. The idea of co-ops was spreading across the country, and in 1863 the Cooperative Wholesale Society was formed, buying in bulk to supply stock to the growing number of shops. This became the Cooperative Group. Most co-ops had a reading room above the shop that members could use, as education was seen as very important for all. In the Rochdale Pioneers Cooperative, many men and women had their first opportunity to take part in voting, years before general elections were in existence. Women were welcome in cooperatives from the very beginning, given equal voting rights, and were allowed to sign for their dividend. A minimum wage was implemented in 1907, 90 years before becoming law in the UK, and cooperatives were often ahead of their time when it came to issues like pensions and working conditions. Workers at a cooperative factory in Crumpsall had a piano, library, and even a football club at work, and they were the first biscuit makers in the country to work an 8-hour day. Employees even got a wedding cake given to them by the factory when they got married. Cooperatives are famous for caring for their members, even looking after the families of soldiers by continuing to pay their salaries whilst at war and assuring them jobs on their return home. Cooperatives spread worldwide and now have 1 billion members. From bankers and grocers to snake catchers and taxi drivers, more than 120 million people now work cooperatively. From the introduction of the Fair Trade Mark in 1994, cooperatives have been committed to stocking fair trade products, helping to support millions of food growers in developing countries. The massive impact of the actions of those 28 people back in 1844 has influenced a global movement, a new way of living and working. The original shop on Toad Lane has been preserved as a museum, so you can come and find out about cooperation, share cooperative stories, and discover more about the Rochdale pioneers.
Cooperation might be an old idea, but people are still recognising that cooperatives, built on the principles that the pioneers developed, are a great way of providing the things we need every day. And 1 in 5 people in the UK now belongs to a cooperative.
From housing to food, schools to transport, there's a cooperative for everybody. So if you're not a member, why not join the global movement so you too can spread the word about cooperation? As we continue to work together to build a better world, it's our time to move towards a brighter, more cooperative future.
Could you hear her all right? Sorry, because that's probably where I'm standing. I couldn't hear very well. That's okay. You can find that on YouTube if you want to share it with anybody. It is on YouTube. So one of the points that was made in the film was that the Rochdale pioneers agreed on a set of principles that they were going to have to run their business on. They wrote down their constitution in this document called the Law First, which so it's in wonderful 19th century language, but you know, this is the sort of thing that we have in our archives. It's really amazing to go back, and you can trace back exactly where the modern day values and principles of the cooperative movement came from by looking at the Rochdale principles in their constitution. So the pioneers ended up, after 2 or 3 years and a few revisions, with 7 key principles that they operated on. The first was the idea of open membership. And that might seem like a really obvious one to us today. You know, we live in an age of equality of opportunity where, you know, most things are open to anybody who wants to join. But this principle was set down at a time 74 years before women achieved suffrage, at a time when most organisations that existed, membership organisations, existed to protect the interests of a minority, of a particular group of people. And only 1 in 7 men in the UK had the vote at that time as well. So the idea of an open membership was really quite radical. The second principle, democratic control, in brackets in the Law First, 1 man, 1 vote. Even though they made it very clear, it was the terminology of the time, they made it very clear that women were welcome as members, and that they would have equal rights. Women were allowed to collect their dividend, to actually own a share in the business, which was unheard of in the rest of society at the time, certainly for working class women. Owning any sort of property was just unheard of. So, in fact, and this is something else that we only discovered very recently, when you look at the membership lists, the very early membership lists in the first 2 or 3 years, there's the name of a woman who appeared to be a member. And there's absolutely no other, we can't find any other references to her anywhere else. We can't find any trace of her in any of the local parish records or anything like that. And we're pretty sure now that she didn't actually exist, but it was a bit of positive action in 19th century style, that actually to show that the society, women really could join and become members. They put a woman's name in the membership list, so it would hopefully encourage other women to come forward and join, even though she wasn't real. It's an interesting one. So yeah, I mean, a lot of the people who were members of the Pioneers group had been Chartists and were Chartists, and the idea of suffrage and the vote was very, very key to their political beliefs. So they didn't actually write in democratic control to the first version of the law first. It didn't appear until a year later. I think it was a bit of an oversight that was how they operated and expected to operate, and hadn't even thought about they perhaps needed to write it down to make sure it always stayed like that. The third one, the distribution of surplus in proportion to trade. One of the pioneers, Charles Howarth, basically came up with this idea, but we think he probably was influenced by an Owenite, a Scottish Owenite called Alexander Campbell, who came to Rochdale, and he had a very similar idea. They wanted to find a way of rewarding loyalty. So rather than you getting a dividend on the amount of investment you put into the cooperative, it would be on the amount you traded, so the amount you'd spent. So the same as the divvy that still exists today, it's based on the extent to which you've shopped in the co-op shop, the amount of divvy that you get back, if you get any back, which for the last couple of years you haven't from the cooperative group. But that was because what's the point in allowing people to be members for them to get a share of the profits if they actually go and shop somewhere else and don't support the business? So this was the way of getting loyalty from members and actually getting them to help promote the business by using it. The fourth one, the payment of limited interest on capital. Again, this seems very technical, but it was about not allowing shares in cooperatives to become a subject of speculation. So if people knew that by putting their money into a cooperative, they would get a reasonable rate of interest on it, but they wouldn't be able to make a fast buck out of it, then that would ensure stability for the cooperative in terms of its capital. And it meant that where significant profits were made, most of those profits were ploughed back into the business to strengthen it and to support it in the future. Political and religious neutrality. Again, you might think, well, if all these people were Chartists and radicals in Rochdale, why did they want a clause like that in? Why was that important to them? And actually, this again links to Robert Owen, who was very much the biggest public figure who was associated with cooperatives across the UK. And he had some quite interesting ideas on other aspects of lifestyle, which lots of people, particularly in religious communities, found pretty abominable. So there was the danger of cooperatives actually being boycotted by people from certain religious groups because of Owen's ideas, and they just wanted to clear all that out and not end up with being a lightning conductor for a whole load of political rubbish that's going on elsewhere and allow that to affect their business. So that became enshrined at that point for that, for that reason. It's interesting how people forget the reasons why things have been put there in the first place, and it did create some splits within the cooperative movement. In the early part of the 20th century, when the Cooperative Party was being formed, and a lot of arguments about, you know, to what extent should the movement be political, and is having our own political party about protecting the movement, or is it about, you know, getting involved in party politics, which some people thought they shouldn't do. Number 6, cash trading only. What had happened to most of the previous consumer cooperatives that had been set up was that they had allowed people goods on credit, and whereas other shopkeepers could get away with doing that because they just put up the prices to cover their losses, cooperatives knew that they would be putting themselves at risk that a few bad debts from people could undermine everything that they'd done. So they felt it was better to actually educate their members to budget properly and help them to find ways of managing within their wages, and then to be able to buy their goods in cash. And the final one, promotion of education. I think the pioneers very quickly realised, or probably long before that realised, that education was key to improving their lifestyles, to improving their life chances. That it was their passport to economic freedom and prosperity. And so they saw the movement as a way to actually be able to provide education to people who couldn't get it anywhere else. I think it's really interesting because this was the last principle to be added, and it wasn't added until 1954. And that was because until then, the regulator didn't allow them to put aside funds out of their profits to spend on education. That wasn't allowed. And in 1854, that changed, and they were allowed to do that. They did it illegally before that, and I really like the idea of this sort of guerrilla education that was going on. As, you know, inside your bag of flour, you'd get some surreptitious book to read, or but the idea of the pioneers and the cooperative societies at the time provided wide-ranging education across all subject areas. Reading rooms, libraries, courses, classes, and it wasn't until probably towards the end of the 19th century when the state was taking full responsibility for providing education that they stopped doing so much general education and focused more on education about cooperatives and for cooperative members. One of the quiz questions was when was the first definition of a co-op. What I was going to do is ask you just to, maybe in twos or threes, just for the people you're sitting with, to just think for 2 minutes and see if you can jot down a sort of 1 or 2 sentence definition of how would you define a co-op? Because we've been sitting here all day talking about co-ops, but what exactly are they? How would you define one? So, do you want to have a think about that for a couple of minutes and see what you can come up with? Is that all right? There aren't any wrong answers, don't worry. Don't feel that you should have prepared for this beforehand. chatting and there seems to be nothing happening, that's all. Actually, I would have thought people would be talking more. It's very quiet. You're murmuring. Oh, you don't have to murmur. It's not the right sort of room for this room, is it?
There's 17. At what time? Like 3 in the afternoon. In the afternoon. Okay, well that's reasonable. Yeah. So I've passed those principles. I mean, like, or you define it beyond, because I feel like those principles well defined so well. In my mind. Yeah. I guess at the heart of it is under control. I guess. But beyond under control. She's making a distinction between principles and values.
Okay, well, just one more minute.
But yeah, not just member control, but I guess in the Rochdale it was one person on vote, so there must have been sort of this majority rule system. For example, not cooperative, we use consensus, which is much more difficult and deliberative, but probably better decision making in the long run.
That's not necessarily.
Well, I don't know. That's how we define it. Well, it's not very cooperative to have. I mean, cooperative won't last very long if you have very divergent views and don't respect and try and find some way to appreciate it. No, I know, but like, how cooperative can you be if it's like 51-49 and you refuse to sort of come to some?
I think in terms of definitions, that's what.
Yeah.
Yeah, it doesn't make sense. You can't carry on.
Okay, do people think they've got some ideas? Yeah? Anybody got anything that they're prepared to share with the rest of us? Go for it, go for it.
Autonomous, voluntary and democratically run association, organised and owned by its members and no one else, people, with the stated aim of mutual aid, self-help, education, and concern for the
Fantastic. That's a really that's a very, very good start. Can anybody better that then? Has anybody got anything that they didn't include? Do you have anything in your definitions that wasn't included in that one?
Can you maybe repeat that, because I didn't
I think that's a challenge now.
Okay. An autonomous and voluntary and democratically run association of people who own and who organise and own who organise to own their own enterprise. I've run out of words. Autonomous, voluntary, democratically run association of people. Where we have to go from there.
Why does it exist?
For self-help, it's mutual aid, concern for the community and education.
nothing to add, I guess.
So, well, for me, it was difficult to get beyond the principles because the principles are sort of a definition of the co-op. I was thinking about, we sort of said member-controlled entity is inherent to it, which sort of issues these notions of democratic and autonomous. But then the means of democratic control for me, I think, is quite important. What is the institution of democracy? How do you institute democracy? And it seems, I don't know so much about it, but this one person, one vote issue sort of lends itself to a sort of majority, maybe supermajority rule. whereas like in our housing co-op, and I know in many other co-ops, they strive for consensus, which is a much more difficult and deliberative process, but probably yields more cooperative results. If you're 51-49 on some substantive issue, and you just go with the 51, then you're going to have strife within. So for me, that means of achieving democracy is quite important to the definition.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right there. And I think, cooperatives are often seen as one member, one vote. That's not necessarily laying down how they need to operate their democracy, but it's to distinguish them from one share, one vote. So, no matter how many shares you have, you only get one vote. You can invest money because you believe in the cooperatives. You can invest up to a certain amount of money in the cooperative, but that doesn't give you a bigger say. And so that's quite an important distinction between, a normal shareholder company model, where your voice is as big as the amount of money you've put in there in the first place. Okay, well, this is the definition that appears in the Statement of Cooperative Identity. I think the guys in the front row definitely have possibly seen this before somewhere and remembered a few of the words. An autonomous association of persons united voluntarily to meet their common economic, social and cultural needs and aspirations through a jointly owned and democratically controlled enterprise. So autonomous, it's not controlled by anybody else other than its members. That might seem really obvious, but not necessarily. It's been a tricky issue for cooperatives in some parts of the world, in the former Soviet bloc and in some of the former British colony countries, where the state has actually set up cooperatives and tried to direct the operation of those cooperatives. So autonomous is actually really important still. People have to choose to become members of co-op. You can't make them. This is interesting one, question that I have with a lot of the schools that I work with, because schools traditionally haven't had members. They have staff and pupils and parents, but none of them become members. So they say, oh, well, it's easy. We'll just make everybody members. Sorry, can't do that. People have to want to join. They have to make a conscious, positive decision to become a member, because with being a member goes a certain responsibilities. And what it brings together are people that have some common need, something that they need, or that they want to improve their lives. So they will have something in common, whether it's the need for goods or a service or employment or a better environment. There'll be something that brings people together in a cooperative. It's jointly owned, every member is an owner, and it's democratically controlled. So that's the basic definition. But the statement goes on to then set out the values and the principles that cooperatives operate under. I'm going to whiz through these fairly quickly. There are 6 cooperative values, then another 4 what are called ethical values, which are values that are not unique to cooperatives. They're good business values, good ethical business values, but they're things that cooperatives try to do. So self-help, and you can see where this came from in terms of the pioneers. They needed access to good quality, unadulterated, reasonably priced food, because their kids were being poisoned and dying from the appalling muck that they were sold as food in the shops by rip-off shopkeepers. you know, we thought that food adulteration scandals were a thing of the 19th century until last year, and it, you know, it's an interesting reminder and an interesting insight into what life must have been like then, before any sort of regulation of food, when you get things like the horse meat scandal. Self-responsibility. Again, going back to the pioneers, everybody who became a member shared responsibility. They were under an obligation to get involved in helping to run the society. Co-ops don't work if some people do all of the work and lots of other people just sit back and moan that it's not being done properly. That's not self-responsibility. If you're not happy with something in your co-op, then you need to do something about it, and you need to hold other people to account, and you need to get your hands dirty with everybody else and so on. So self-responsibility is a really key principle. Democracy we've already talked about. Equality. Equal rights for all members, equal rights and benefits. Equity is about treating people fairly. One example is the way that you distribute profit, and you know, the idea of a dividend that's related to how much you've used the services of the cooperative is an interesting way of trying to treat people, all your members, fairly when you come to redistribute your profits. You know, there are lots of different ways of doing equality, equity, democracy, self-responsibility, and every cooperative has to work those out for itself, but it has to at least be trying to work those out. And finally, solidarity. This is about people within co-ops supporting each other, and also cooperatives supporting other cooperatives. When the pioneers had got their shop going, and they got a couple of other shops set up in Rochdale, then some people from Salford came along and they said, hey, this is great, we want one. And instead of saying, okay, there's an opportunity here, guys, you know, we can expand into Salford now and make some money out of Salford, they didn't. They went over to Salford and they got a group of people together and they said, this is how you do it. Yeah, and that's where solidarity started in the movement. Click through just the ethical values: openness, honesty, social responsibility and caring for others. Things that any good enterprise ought to do, socially responsible enterprise. And then today's cooperative principles, and these link very closely to the Rochdale principles still. I think you'll be able to see where the Rochdale principles are reflected in them. Voluntary and open membership, member democratic control, member economic participation, so an onus on all members to actually be economically active within their cooperative. That might be through their labour or through their purchasing power, or through their rent if you're in a housing co-op. Autonomy and independence, education, training and information, cooperation amongst cooperatives and concerns of the community. So whilst they've been rewritten in a rather more 20th, at least almost 21st century language, you can see that the link back to the original Rochdale principles, I think, from those. I've got a handout for you that's got the values and principles in a bit more detail on it, so do feel free if you want. I've got loads of copies of that if you want more than one. And I've got one more little video that we made for working with members of, mainly of consumer societies, just to introduce the values and principles that I'll show you in a minute. But I know we're pretty much running out of time, aren't we? We okay for? Yeah. Well, I think it might be good if I sort of wrap up and just before I show the video, and then we can finish there. There are just 2 or 3 things I wanted to say in doing that. I hope that the session's given you a fuller understanding of what the cooperative values and principles are. I know we've not been able to go. Normally, if we were doing a training session at the college on cooperative values and principles, we certainly wouldn't be sitting like this for starters, because the way you do things, you know, should reflect them, and we'd be playing lots of games and doing all sorts of other things. But so it's been a bit of a whistle-stop tour of them this afternoon. But the point I wanted you to understand is that they're not just a kind of random collection of worthy ideas about working together. They're actually quite a concrete framework, you know, for building your cooperative on. You can see where they've come from and how they've developed, and hopefully begin to think a little bit about why those particular values and principles. And it might seem quite a small issue when you've got all the other bigger issues of, like, how do we make decisions, and where do we get some money from to get our cooperative started, and who's going to you know, run the food stall next week, and all the other day-to-day pressing things. But actually, I think getting a good understanding of and embedding the values and principles into your cooperative is a really important foundation, making sure that everybody understands them, because if you get that right at the beginning, what you build on top of that will be reasonably safe and sound. So I think it's really worth putting some effort into getting them right. Roger said something in the last session about about what happens when co-ops lose their values and co-ops losing their values. I think it's when co-ops lose their values that a lot of co-ops fail. I think we've seen a very big and tragic example of that recently with the problems of the cooperative group. There are a range of different reasons why co-ops lose their values or become detached from their values. And I think, you know, one of the things that Roger said was about changes in the values of the wider society that you're operating in. And I think there is a big challenge there, because the values of our sort of postmodern consumerist society are very different from much more community-focused values of the of working class communities in the early 19th century. Things have changed a lot, but you know, so we've got to contend with a different context, and that puts a lot of pressure on co-ops' values. I think there's also an issue, particularly in much larger co-ops, where the management of the co-op become detached from the values. You know, the members still regard the values as important, but the managers see their role as, never mind the values, we've got to make the organisation profitable. And once you get that kind of split, you're really, you know, heading for problems, and that's certainly what one of the things that happened at the cooperative group. And I think very often it comes down to a lack of training and education. And when we were chatting over lunch, I know you were saying that you've really, the process of setting up the co-op, you've learnt so much, and you've